On July 2nd, 1943, at Castelvetrano Airfield in Sicily, a German Focke-Wulf 190 pilot never saw the American P-40 Warhawk diving from above until machine gun bullets ripped through his plane, sending it crashing into the Sicilian fields below. First Lieutenant Charles B. Hall, a 22-year-old from Brazil, Indiana, had just done what German Luftwaffe commanders thought was impossible. A black pilot had shot down one of their top fighter planes. That afternoon, Hall painted a swastika on his P-40L Warhawk, marking the first of 112 enemy aircraft that would be destroyed by the men the Germans reportedly called the Schwarze Vogelmenschen, or Black Birdmen. In Nazi Germany, racist ideas labeled black people as Untermenschen, or subhuman, saying they could not handle complex machines or show bravery in battle, and laws even banned marriages between Germans and people of African descent. But high in the skies over the Mediterranean, that false belief was about to crash hard against the truth, as 992 trained pilots from Tuskegee, Alabama, would destroy both German planes and German ideas about racial superiority. What the Luftwaffe pilots did not know as they flew up to attack American bombers in 1943 was that they were facing some of the best trained and most determined fighter pilots in the whole U.S. Army Air Forces, men who had overcome extra challenges that white pilots never dealt with, who had trained longer and harder than usual, and who fought not just for their country, but to prove what an entire race could do. The numbers of air battles would soon show in the European skies. 15,000 combat flights, 1,578 missions, 112 air victories, and a much lower rate of lost bombers compared to white fighter groups. Facts that even the most stubborn Nazi believers had to face, showing how wrong their racist ideas were. The path to that first air win started not in war, but in the tough world of American segregation. In 1925, the U.S. Army War College put out a report called Employment of Negro Manpower in War that said, compared to the white man, he is admittedly of inferior mentality. He is inherently weak in character. This official view claimed black soldiers lacked the smarts for technical jobs and the guts for leading in fights. But even as military leaders held onto these biases, a few black Americans were already proving them false. Eugene Bullard had flown for France in World War I because America would not let him. And Bessie Coleman got her pilot's license in France in 1921, since no U.S. school would take her. By the 1930s, the Coffin School of Aeronautics in Chicago had taught dozens of black civilian pilots, showing that flying skills had no color lines. As war loomed over Europe, the push for change grew stronger, with civil rights leaders like Walter White of the NAACP, labor leader A. Philip Randolph, and Judge William H. Hasty pushing hard for black people to join military flying. Black newspapers like the Chicago Defender, Pittsburgh Courier, and Baltimore Afro-American kept pressuring President Roosevelt's government with a clear question: how could America battle for freedom overseas while denying it to people at home? On April 3, 1939, Public Law 18 finally opened the door a little when Senator Harry H. Schwartz added a rule requiring the civilian pilot training program to include at least one school for training black pilots. As chosen by the Civil Aeronautics Authority, it was a small segregated step, but a start. When Roosevelt ran for a third term in 1940, he needed black votes in big northern cities. So on January 16, 1941, Secretary of War Henry L. Stimson announced the creation of the 99th Pursuit Squadron, an all-black flying unit. But it came with a warning that showed what the military really thought. This was an experiment to see if black people could become combat pilots. Captain Benjamin O. Davis Jr. knew the heavy responsibility of leading when he took 26 pilots from the 99th Fighter Squadron to North Africa in April 1943, the son of America's first black general. Davis had survived 4 years at West Point, where white cadets ignored him except for official talks. And now he led men who carried the hopes of 13 million black Americans. The 99th reached Farjuna, Tunisia, and joined the 33rd Fighter Group under Colonel William W. Momier, who openly doubted black pilots and gave them simple patrol jobs over the sea to keep them from real fights, hoping they would fail so he could prove his point. When they did not shine right away, he used that as an excuse, but June 2nd, 1943, brought their first combat mission, an attack on the Italian island of Pantelleria. As their old P-40 Warhawks rose toward the targets, German fighters showed up, yet the Tuskegee pilots stayed in formation and protected their bombers with no losses on either side, teaching the Germans that these pilots would not panic under fire. But July 2nd, 1943, changed it all. Charles Hall was on his 8th mission, guarding B-25 Mitchell bombers hitting Castelvetrano airfield in Sicily, when two Focke-Wulf 190s attacked the bombers. Hall later said, "I saw two Focke-Wulfs following the bombers just after the bombs were dropped. I headed for the space between the fighters and bombers and managed to turn inside the Jerries. I fired a long burst and saw my tracers penetrate the second aircraft. He was turning to the left but suddenly fell off and headed straight into the ground. When Hall landed, the whole base cheered, especially the black ground crews who had put up with insults from white staff for months. This was the first air kill by a black American pilot in U.S. military history. By January 1944, after 7 months in combat, Colonel Momier wrote a bad report saying they lacked drive and should be pulled from fighting, which reached General Henry Hap Arnold, who got ready to end the experiment. Then came Anzio on January 27, 1944. The Luftwaffe hit Allied troops hard at the Anzio beachhead, and 15 pilots from the 99th and old P-40 faced better Focke-Wulf 190s over the battlefield, leading to a fight that shut down the doubters forever. The 99th downed between 8 and 13 enemy planes over 2 days, with Captain Charles Hall getting 2 more kills for a total of 3, and in just those days, with worse gear, they destroyed more enemies than in their first 7 months. The War Department studied the 99th against other P-40 units and found they did just as well as white ones, proving black pilots could thrive if given a fair chance. In May 1944, the 332nd Fighter Group, combining the 99th, 100th, 301st, and 302nd Fighter Squadrons, got orders that turned them from outsiders to heroes. They joined the 15th Air Force to escort bombers on long, risky trips deep into Nazi Germany. Colonel Benjamin Davis told his pilots at Ramitelli Airfield in Italy, "We cannot afford to lose bombers. Our job is not to be aces. Our job is to bring those bombers home, setting their rule to stick with the bombers no matter what. In June 1944, General Nathan Twining gave fighter groups color codes for quick spotting, assigning the 332nd bright red, not just on noses or bands, but whole tails painted red, plus red propeller tips and nosebands on their P-51 Mustangs, making them easy to recognize. At first, bomber crews getting red tail escorts did not know the pilots were black. They just saw fighters that stayed close and never left for easy kills. So word spread. Ask for the red tails if you can. July 18th, 1944, tested the red tails like nothing else. Colonel Davis led 66 Mustangs to meet bombers attacking the Luftwaffe base at Memmingen, Germany. But the bombers were late, so Davis chose to circle in enemy land instead of going back. When the bombers came, about 100 German fighters attacked from all sides, thinking big numbers could break the Red Tails' guard, and despite the 332nd strong fight claiming 11 or 12 wins, 15 B-17s were lost in 20 minutes of hard battle, with 3 Red Tail pilots killed: Lieutenants Robert Hutton, Wellington Irving, and Alfred Brown. Critics said the high bomber losses showed black pilots could not handle big fights, but reviews showed the truth. The 332nd arrived to a mess with Germans already attacking, and they stopped a total wipeout. By March 1945, regular Luftwaffe fighters could hardly challenge Allied air power, but Germany had the Messerschmitt Me 262, the first working jet fighter at 540 miles per hour, faster than any prop plane. On March 24th, 1945, the 332nd got its toughest job. Escort bombers 1,600 miles round trip to Berlin to hit the Daimler-Benz tank factory, with warnings of Me-262s from Jagdgeschwader 7 defending it. Colonel Davis led 43 P-51s into Germany's heart, and near Berlin, the biggest group of jets ever for one attack appeared. Lieutenant Roscoe Brown, who knew the jet's weak spot, said, "We knew the German jets were faster than we were. Instead of going directly after them, we went away from them and then turned into their blind spots." Brown downed one Me-262, firing 3 long bursts from 2,000 feet, and the pilot bailed out at 24,500 feet. Lieutenant Earl Lane hit another with a 2,000-yard shot using the new K-14 gun sight, and Lieutenant Charles Brantley got the third. Destroying 3 jets in one fight beat what most groups did in the whole war, earning the 332nd a Distinguished Unit citation. Not every meeting between Tuskegee Airmen and Germans ended in wins. 32 pilots became prisoners of war, and their stories showed a mix of Nazi racist ideas and real military life. Lieutenant Alexander Jefferson was shot down on August 12, 1944, during his 19th mission when his P-51 hit flak over southern France while attacking radar sites. At questioning, the German officer knew a lot about the 332nd, like their Ramitelli base, squadron leaders, and even Jefferson's family details in Detroit, showing scary good German spying. In Stalag Luft III prison camp, Jefferson was treated like other American officers, and white POWs from bombers often thanked him for red tail protection. These equal talks, impossible in segregated America, happened easily in a Nazi camp, and Jefferson noted the irony. Here I was in a Nazi POW camp, being treated more equally by white Americans than I would be back home. When the war ended and he returned to the U.S., segregation hit right away at the arrival point. While German pilots reportedly respected the Red Tails by calling them Schwarze Vogelmenschen, American bomber crews became their biggest fans, caring only about staying alive, not race. They made up stories about the Red Tails' unique flying, like wing waggles to say hello, tight groups, and never leaving hurt bombers, nicknaming them Red Tail Angels. Numbers back this up. Air Force historian Dr. Daniel Hallman found bombers with 332nd escorts lost just 27 planes to enemy fighters versus 46 on average for other 15th Air Force P-51 groups, even on the longest, hardest missions. By war's end, the Tuskegee Airmen's record smashed every old doubt about black military skills. 1,578 combat missions, over 15,000 flights, 179 bomber escorts, 311 missions for the 15th Air Force, 112 air kills, 150 ground kills, 3 Me-262 jets down on March 24th, 1945, destroyed 950 rail cars, trucks, and vehicles, 254 train engines, and damaged the Italian destroyer Giuseppe Missori beyond fix on June 25, 1944, plus a better protection rate with 27 bombers lost versus the 46 average. Individual stars shown too. Lee Archer with 4 wins, Joseph Ellsbury with 4, including 3. Focke-Wulf 190s on July 12, 1944. Edward Toppins with 4. Clarence Lester with 3 in 1 mission on July 18, 1944. Awards included 96 Distinguished Flying Crosses for 332nd pilots, 744 Air Medals, 14 Bronze Stars, 8 Purple Hearts, 3 Distinguished Unit Citations for the 99th, and 1 for the 332nd. But it cost lives. 66 pilots killed in action, 32 captured, 84 dead in training or non-combat. This shift from doubt to praise came from better U.S. training and tech that the Red Tails used well. At Tuskegee, they flew 300 hours versus 200 for white pilots. Drilled formations endlessly knowing discipline was key, with a 60% dropout rate versus 40% for whites, making them what Commander Colonel Noel Parrish called a super-selected group. They started with old P-40 Warhawks, worse than German Messerschmitt, Bf-109S, and Focke-Wulf 190S in speed and climb, but good at turns and tough build, holding their own until P-51 Mustangs arrived in July 1944. These top planes with Packard Merlin engines hit 437 miles per hour, had 6.50 caliber guns, and ranged over 1,600 miles with extra tanks to guard bombers anywhere. Behind the pilots, about 16,000 Tuskegee Airmen total included under 1,000 flyers, with the rest as mechanics, armorers, and crew chiefs keeping planes ready despite poor Ramitelli airfield, few parts, and low supply priority, yet matching or beating white units' ready rates. Even under German bombs like the March 24th, 1944, raid that killed some, they kept working. The big bombing push over Europe tested the Tuskegee Airmen perfectly. Each B-17 cost $238,000 and held 10 trained crew. So losing one hurt the war effort, making protection more vital than kills, which Colonel Davis stressed by telling pilots to ignore chasing enemies and stay put. Anyone can, shoot down a fighter if they abandon their post. It takes discipline to stay with the bombers when the enemy is running. Their tactics grew to a 3-layer shield, close escorts weaving over bombers, medium ones to catch incoming foes, high ones for dive attacks, all needing perfect teamwork. The Tuskegee Airmen battled fascism abroad and racism at home, their wins questioning both Nazi ideas and U.S. segregation by showing skill ignored skin color. While fighting Germans, they faced home prejudice, with black papers highlighting their victories, but mainstream ones ignoring them, like the Pittsburgh Courier's Double V push for wins against fascism and racism, using the airmen as proof. Germans knew who flew the Red Tails by 1945, calling them Schwarze Vogelmenschen. But many white Americans did not, as the War Department hid their successes. After victory in Europe, white units got parades while the 332nd faced unsure futures, with plans to keep segregation despite proof it was silly. For years, their story stayed hidden, like Lee Archer saying no one believed a black fighter pilot, so he rarely talked about it. In 1948, President Truman's Executive Order 9981 integrated the military, helped by the Airmen's Record. Benjamin Davis became the Air Force's first black general in 1954. Full honor came slow, with President George W. Bush giving the Congressional Gold Medal in 2007 to the Tuskegee Airmen, where only 300 original pilots lived to see it after over 60 years. The facts stay strong. 112 air wins against the Luftwaffe, 3 Me-262s in one mission, 150 ground kills, 27 bombers lost versus 46 average, 96 distinguished flying crosses. The Schwarz-Vogelmenschen showed bias falls to real skill. Every downed German plane, saved bomber, and finished mission proved skin color meant nothing for flying and fighting. Roscoe Brown, who hit a jet over Berlin, said, "We didn't just fight the Germans. We fought ignorance, prejudice, and hatred, and we won all 3 battles." The Tuskegee Airmen did not just win fights. They changed history, beating the Luftwaffe, Nazi racism, and American segregation through top skill. When given a chance, they flew high, turning mockery to respect, bias to welcome, and foes to admirers of their great wins.